All right, let's get into today's talent. I am super excited. So first up, we've got Amber Bogie, Director of Demand Gen at Plug Power. And Amber's 5 to 9. She's a yoga teacher, a dog mom, and a self-care enthusiast. Next up, we've got Jennifer Lever, Senior Global ABM Manager at Bazaarvoice. And in her 5 to 9, she loves camping, puzzles, red wine, and Austin's food scene. Next up, we've got Richa Pande, who is the global head of ABM campaigns over at HP in her 9 to 5. And in her 5 to 9, she loves garden design, radio. She's a radio show host, and she's actually writing a book for tweens. Super awesome. And of course, we are led by today, Becky Martins, head of field marketing at ABM for North America over at Zuora. And in her 5 to 9, she loves documentaries, cooking, and Latin dance. So I will pass it over to Becky to get today's session going. Thank you all for joining us, and let's get going.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. And hello, everybody. Hello to my esteemed panel and to all of our guests and session attendees on the line today. We're really excited to have you on our session, which is all about award-winning ABM experiences. So just some very light housekeeping before we get into the good stuff. We've got a lot of great content to share with everybody today, but we want to keep this interactive. So at any point, drop in a question. We'll get to as many as we can as we go. And we'll also have time at the end that we will cover Q&A in kind of a dedicated space. And then to my panelists, I've got some great questions ready for you. But at the same time, if you feel compelled to piggyback on someone's response, let's keep this really kind of open and engaging and kind of just see where the conversation goes. So without further ado, let's jump into the good stuff. And I'm going to start with you, Jen. Just table stakes stuff. When you hear the acronym ABM, which to me is kind of the biggest buzzword, I think, in our kind of B2B world today, what does that mean to you? What resonates the most, especially when you think about this kind of world of experiences that we all care so much about?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad that you said the word experiences too, because for me, account-based marketing goes beyond marketing, right? It's about the experience that you're putting your high fit accounts through. So when I really take a step back and look at it, for me, it's the go-to-market strategy that aligns revenue teams. So your sales, marketing, CS, even product, around a common goal for your strategic goal, accounts. And that goal is revenue. On a tactic level, it's a combination of, combined personalized marketing and sales experiences that you put into the market that really helps engage with those target accounts across the entire buyer journey. And for my organization specifically, it's a business strategy for us to build those relationships with our key accounts and drive revenue.
That's great, Jen. And when you think of that part about your organization, like who are those different teams that come together to bring ABM to life? Is it just marketing, or is it a lot more than that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's heavy involvement between marketing, sales, our customer success teams, especially if we're looking at our strategy from a growth and retention standpoint. I mean, all of them are key stakeholders in really understanding the pain points of the accounts that we're targeting, understand the messaging that we need to put in market to really align with those pain points and drive those outcomes that we want to achieve. We also partner very closely with our product marketing team as well, and sales enablement to make sure that our sales team is equipped with the assets they need to go to market and have those relevant conversations.
Totally. Yeah. Amber, I'm going to ask the same question to you because I know this is one that's near and dear to your heart. And I'd say ABM has been an evolution for you over the last few years. Anything you could share with us today?
Well, I'd love to just highlight what Jen had kind of said about strategy versus tactic level of ABM. I love just having the separation. Just because I oftentimes think that it gets kind of lost into the tactic. And I think that kind of comes down to a lot of, how I perceive ABM these days and how it comes, very near and dear to my heart in terms of the evolution of ABM in my mind. And so I look at it as the most simple way how I look at ABM is a targeted strategic approach to accounts across the organization. And so, as Jen had mentioned, you've got, the strategy, you also have the tactics. And in the past, when I had been running ABM, I felt like I had blinders on. And I think that there was a reason that I thought ABM was so important. It was just like the most important thing that nobody was seeing. And over the time, implementations, years of experience of definitely hitting the wall, scraping my knees, the blinders started to just get wider and wider until they sort of just came off. And so ultimately, to me, I look at ABM as a targeted approach for an organization. It's a business strategy, and I think it's really important to have your ABM strategy working across the organization and within marketing, not to be segmented out so separately, to weave in your strategy into the entire funnel of your demand. And so it's something that I'm working on right now is building out an entire demand engine, having come from a background of really just being an ABM. And so firsthand, I'm working to figure out how do you do that in a seamless way and avoid the silos that come pretty naturally. How do you build it out in the organization, and not, I think, brand it as ABM within the organization, which I think can set you up for some struggle along the way.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm reading, I think it's D'Acosta's comment, ABM is such a trigger word. It's a buzzword. It's a trigger word. It can really lead to great things, but also maybe conversations that weren't even the intention. And I think there's even different definitions in people's minds of what ABM is, whether you're in core marketing or you're in outside kind of key stakeholder groups like sales. But I think it's also, you said something too that resonates. It's how do you actually do this? I think we all as B2B tech marketers know, like, this is the evolution of our space, especially as we all move up market and we go after large strategic accounts. Like, you just can't do that from just pure scalable tech plays. But the how you do it is still kind of not the mystery, but the thing that is still kind of coming together. And that's what I love having this panel with you guys today, because I think that's some of the insight that we don't have it all figured out, but we can share some things that have worked really well, but also things that maybe we've learned from. And we would do differently next time, that if we can share both of those buckets of guidance and insight, hopefully we're helping somebody out today. So
absolutely.
With that said, I'm going to transition to some of the guidance, the insight that hopefully we can share with our folks on the call. So Richa, next question is for you. Just as much as the successes are important, those lessons learned are just as important, especially as we experiment and try new things. What are some of your most important lessons learned? And if you think about like any pitfalls you may have come across, like what are those pitfalls you'd want to share so that future you, or maybe you 10 years ago would avoid them again if you had the chance, and maybe someone listening in today could learn from them?
That's a great question, Becky. I can share some hair saving techniques, because you will pull your hair out if you're doing it for the first time. So let's save some hair out there. I think there are many things that can go wrong with account-based marketing. First of all, I think ABM is very seductive right now. It's the hot thing. Everyone wants to do it. And people get seduced into taking action without planning, the instant gratification of doing something. Whereas ABM is, I think, just like, I'm not a spokesperson, but I'll use a sports analogy here. The magic lies in the drills and the prep work in order to have a phenomenal play. What you see in the field is not it. It's the many, many drills you did prior to that. So I think, first of all, as with all things, your intention has to be right. So the key distinction for ABM versus demand gen is ABM is account-led, meaning customer obsession, not pursuit-led, meaning sales coming to you like, we need sales this quarter, do something. So that's a key distinction. If you fail to make that distinction a common thread through all the steps you take, you will sabotage your efforts. So if you want customer obsession, what does that mean? Your prep work has to reflect that customer obsession. The accounts you target, you have to be deeply, deeply intimate in understanding what are their unique pain points. If you are targeting telecom, not all customers will have the same pain points within the telecom vertical. So if you have to go so deep, then the next sin that you have to avoid is think that if you target 400, 500 accounts, between the activity across all these accounts, you'll hedge your bets and you'll be able to deliver a needle moving result. You won't. Sometimes we are so afraid to just start with 5 accounts or 10 accounts because we're like, what if everything fails? How will I justify my position? How will I justify my marketing budget? Let's go target 400 accounts. Surely something will hatch. Well, that's a recipe for disaster. Another sin that all of us tend to succumb to is we get very seduced by the allure of very sexy MarTech. Ooh, there's a new technology and everyone's talking about it on LinkedIn. I got to try it out, right? There's a great quote that I read by Avinash Kaushik just this morning. So it is kind of like a wonderful coincidence. For every $10 spent in tech, $90 should be spent on the human being who translates that tech into insights and action. And sometimes we're so busy collecting tech, we lose sight of the accounts of what we're trying to do. And lastly, I would say governance. Sometimes marketing doesn't have the bandwidth, the energy, and the time to build consensus. So what do? We start operating in a bubble. Well, let me tell you, you're just deferring your problems. A month, 2 months down the line, the sales reps that you need to access those accounts will be like, wait a minute, what are you trying to do? So do the hard work up front, build that consensus, give up control, let people put their paws on your plan. Don't have a mentality of controlling everything. Allow other people to shape the plan.
Yeah.
And then build governance for the execution.
Mm-hmm. Drop in knowledge bombs, Richa. That's amazing. I love
Thank you.
I love what you said about consensus and alignment. So where we are at Zuora, where I work, we've been learning a lot about this just by trial and error this year, and just the concept of alignment goes a long way. Because, there's a lot of work that even goes into like, what are those 4 or 5 accounts or those, 40 accounts or whatever that number may be. And down to like, who does what with those accounts and making sure everybody's on the same page. Kind of those things matter downstream if we're looking for the success and the learnings and the other things that, ideally we want to get to. Consensus, it's a team sport. As we started off the conversation with, it's definitely not a marketing-led, marketing-only motion. It has to be a go-to-market motion. Across all of these key stakeholders that we care about every day. Okay, so love that. Jen, same question. Like when you think about kind of first back to like the things you've learned, pitfalls you may avoid or you'd want others to know about so they could avoid, like what would be your takeaways on that?
Yeah, well, I support everything that Richa just mentioned. I mean, these are all things that I think the 3 of us have experienced throughout our ABM journey. For me, the biggest pitfall or 2 that come to mind is scalability and simplicity. So for me, the biggest thing, and when you join a new organization, or because ABM is such a hot topic right now, so many people want to move right into the one-to-one plays, which sometimes is a good fit for your organization. But you may not have the resources available to support the lift that it takes to really execute a one-to-one play. Maybe your sales team isn't ready for that level of engagement or partnership. And then again, back to the internal resources. I mean, when you think about one-to-one, it's custom content, it's custom website experiences. I mean, there's a whole gamut of, again, those tactics that you can put into market, not to mention the sales enablement side of things. So I think, making sure that you ease into your ABM, not only from the strategy that you want to go to market with, but also from a reporting standpoint and how you're showing marketing's impact on those business outcomes that you're trying to drive alongside sales. ABM is a marathon and not a sprint. And it does take time. And I think alignment on what those KPIs are to start is extremely important to make sure that you show the success of the program, and celebrating those small milestones along the way, I think, is also sometimes a piece that's missed because people want to see revenue. They want to see it being a pipe generator and then ultimately, driving revenue, and we'll get there. But I think even showing those small wins around, are we getting engaged with net new contacts at the account? Yes. Are we starting to show traction in terms of our conversation and the interactions and the relationship that our account team is building with those key accounts? I think that sometimes that anecdotal evidence is not always translated into the reporting metrics that we share out to the wider business. And then to my point around simplicity, your sales teams have a ton thrown at them every single day, right? And while when you pitch ABM to them, it's something that everyone gets really excited about, and they're like, they can see the value around it. But it's also how you package that strategy. Slightly to what Richa was mentioning earlier as well, is like, it's about accountability. It's about making sure that the sales team understands their role, they understand their swim lanes, and they understand how marketing is a partner in that process, and not just simply another resource, right? So, for me, scalability and simplicity are the two biggest things.
Love that. I could honestly comment on so many things you just said. And I love what you said about being a partner as a marketer. Like, we call it being a strategic advisor within my team. Like, we are a partner and advisor. We are not like an event planning team. We are not like a tactical execution team. We are a partner with seat at the table. And together there's kind of this joint go-to-market team that goes after these accounts at the one-to-one or even at the one-to-few level. So I love all of that, Jen. And it's actually a really good segue to kind of like the meat and potatoes of this session, is about the actual experiences that we're creating and kind of what are some of the things that have worked for everybody over the years. And I think it also ties nicely into what you were saying about simplicity. I think it's really, sometimes these, big, elaborate, big budget campaigns make sense, probably for like the highest top tier accounts that you have. But sometimes simplicity, makes just as much sense depending on, the idea or the outcome that we're driving towards. And so, Amber, this makes me think of you. And I love what you had told me in a prior, conversation about one of your best campaigns really had nothing more than just a single asset at kind of the core. And would love to, for you to share some of those best practices with this group and kind of like what that was, what were you ultimately trying to achieve, and what were the results?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to like one-to-one ABM campaigns, I think that it's super dependent on what your organization's focus is and what you need to do today. And that's completely different across, every place that you're in. One of my favorite one-to-one experiences that yielded really fantastic results was, as you mentioned, is a single asset. It was a campaign. It was actually a campaign that we had done to a customer doing upsell, cross-sell at the time. And so what we did was we built out a unique asset for them. We identified that on our platform they had one of our solutions. And we wanted to obviously, expand with them. So what we did was we took their company goals and initiatives, and we tied those goals directly to the same kinds of stories that we have with our customers. So we took some quotes from their leadership and put them on the left side of the page. On the right side of the page, we had, within the same industry, companies that had gone after the same goals and how our product had supported in that success. So every page you turned, goal, success, multiple customers. And on the final page, it was, here you are now with our product, and here's where, with our product, we can take you here. That was probably the first time in my career that I had a salesperson come up and say, this is the reason that the deal closed, this right here. And it was not a minor one. It was a $1 million opportunity that closed. So it was a single asset that closed $1 million. Now that was a very labor intensive campaign that we put together, but it did change my perspective on one-to-ones ever since then. And so going back to the types of one-on-ones that you do are dependent on the type, the focus of your organization. Maybe you need to have more one-to-ones, and so you need to figure out how to scale, or you're focusing on those big ones. I think ultimately, no matter what kind you're doing, the focus should be on the value and the direct impact of that prospect or customer, and the actual tying to their goals and their priorities and where they can see wins. Less about us, we. It's you. And so that to me is the distinct differentiation. And when I'm doing what I call like a one-to-one light, which is more like, you have display advertisements, or you create a custom landing page, turning it around pretty quickly. All of those encompass that same goal of tying it back to their goals and their priorities, not just having their name in a banner.
Yeah. It really goes back to this concept of personalization, and personalization, not just in the story that you tell and like having their logo in the corner of a data sheet, but also like what matters to them and what they are waking up and thinking about and stressing, and then aligning eventually how we can help solve your problems. And here's some, other folks like you that we've helped just as proof. So I think that's really smart. And it's probably even scalable too when you think about it. It's probably something that the content was so custom, but the approach could be templated and applied to other accounts like that. So in a way that was so labor intensive once, maybe down the road, you probably could
Definitely
or did.
A lot easier the second go around.
Yeah.
And I like to always, remember too, like we're marketing toward, to various different types of buyers and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we're always human. So I think what were the most impactful experiences that I have received, and hands down, they were personal and they understood my job and responsibilities, and oftentimes something personal about me, not in a creepy way, but there was like a genuine effort that they went to find out something about an initiative and tie it to something that could have an impact. And so those are the ones that I remember. Those are the ones that I replied to, or I set up a meeting with. That's the biggest difference to me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's keep going down the line of award-winning ABM experiences. So this question is for Richa. So I know yours, you probably have so many that you could share, but the one that you kind of nominated for today was around breaking into new verticals. Would love to learn more of how you thought about that, which is just such an important go-to-market decision and motion for a company in general. But when you layer ABM onto that, like what was that strategy? What were the campaigns? What were some of the outcomes you were driving towards, and any of the results you could talk about?
Sure. But first, I have to acknowledge what we've all done growing up as marketers, which is put the customer logo on a data sheet. That really cracked me up. We've all been there.
All been there at some point.
So talking about setting up a new vertical. So again, going back to the intention, which is customer obsession. A lot of stars aligned the right way for us at HP make this happen. I was looking for a playground to play out a one-to-few ABM play, right? I've said play too often, but I wanted a sandbox where we could try out a one-to-few play. And so I was looking for a space. And at the same time, our engineering / R&D department, I got to know that they were working on a healthcare initiative. And I was noticing, I did some analysis, and I noticed that we seem to be doing well, even without tremendous focus. We seem to be doing really well tapping into the healthcare segment. So that just, the dots started to start connect. And that prompted some investment of time and head scratching on my part. Before we decided to put in the effort and the energy and the dollars into looking at this vertical, I had my team do a vertical assessment. So we came up with about 15 to 17 variables that were very customized to what where HP could play, where HP could support. Were we at a place where we could come up with very strong value proposition by account? So we did that rigorous analysis to make sure that healthcare was the place, and we weren't running after the newest shiny thing available in the R&D store, right, of goodies to be sold. So, we looked at financial services, we looked at high tech, public sector, and then healthcare. And then through that analysis, healthcare bubbled to the top. And I think Jen mentioned earlier that, yes, of course, in ABM, we get measured on revenue. So it was very important, since we were going into a new vertical where it's not like we never sold into healthcare, but it wasn't a strategic focus per se. So I wanted to make sure that we set up the measurement of success right. Yes, of course, pipe and revenue will never go away, but those were not the only metrics that had to be measured. As we started to better understand the pain points and the opportunities in this segment, we realized that the best way to make an impact was to talk to the most influential group in a healthcare system, which are the clinicians. And even the typical customer that HP sells into, the IT buyer, was not that influential for buying tech. The clinician was the main stakeholder that the IT buyer had to win over in their own organization. So this was a different game. And our sales reps, I mean, clinicians are notoriously very tough audience to speak to. And our sales reps did not have any relationships with that audience. So the problem statement then was, not only do we have to find out what is the customized value proposition, but we have to make sure that the value proposition has to be targeted at this clinician audience. Mm-hmm. And it has to be patient outcome based, which was the metric that the clinicians were being measured on. So we had to tie it to their metrics and reposition HP in their mind. I mean, on the one hand, you could think chief medical officer of a gigantic healthcare system, Kaiser Permanente, could see HP as, well, the company that makes printers. To go from there to be a player that could influence patient outcomes, that was the journey we had to take. It was such an education for me. I didn't know how tied up printing is in the workflow of a healthcare system. And we had to bring that knowledge to the surface and help them understand you have to make the right decisions of how you set up your workflow to get the patient outcomes you're desiring. Yeah. So long story short, we follow an ITSMA-based 7-step process. We went through the rigor of that process, and in about 3 quarters, we were able to drive engagement with 630 different healthcare systems at the clinician level. That was our success criteria. That if we engaged just IT, it would not be scored a win. We had to engage with the CMO staff. And the way we did it was we found certain personas that sat between clinicians and IT, which was the Department of Informatics. So that was our in, because the CMO won't take HP's call. That time, the worlds didn't intersect at all. So we leveraged informatics people that could understand IT and could also understand the clinician's point of view. That was our into accounts. And we leveraged some very special influencers in this space that are part of HP's customer advocacy groups to crack open those accounts, to get very meaningful engagement at the clinician level. So this was a very thoughtful, step-by-step methodical approach into cracking into a new vertical with the right audience, instead of just limiting ourselves to IT and procurement, which would have been status quo for us, which would just be like taking advantage of the momentum we had.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Really interesting, Richa. And it feels like, there's so much that we can do with ABM where we can just throw some spaghetti against the wall sometimes, see what sticks. Sometimes that makes sense. In this case, it really made more sense to start and kind of build out from the bottoms up, like ultimately, what is this account or these sets of accounts actually thinking about, caring about? What are their problems? Where can we meet them where they are? Where can we add value? And all of that legwork seemed like it was the right, first, second, third step to go through to then have very clear value prop messaging, knowing what personas to go after, because we have to think about too, it's not just the accounts, but the people within these companies that we're trying to, and even those, motivations and pain points are different. So even knowing that level of detail is so important in this motion. And then to your, it sounds like you use influencers or customers just to kind of help sell the story and maybe sell for you in a way to peers that they may have within this industry or just other like-minded executives. So also really, really interesting. And ABM is it can be the one-to-many where it makes sense. No, it can also be that one sniper approach that takes a lot of research and preparation, but when you nail it, the dividends just really pay off. And it sounds like that's exactly what you guys saw.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So 2 really great examples so far, 2 very different. And so Jen, let's kind of third and final ABM experience. And we've got a bunch of questions we're going to jump to right after this. Let's talk about your kind of most interesting experience. I think when you and I chatted last, one of the ideas was around channel and thinking about different channels that have really worked for you. So direct mail being one of them. It kind of timely, you were on an Alice conference. So I think it's actually perfect that lined up that way. But would love to just understand, like, how have you leveraged direct mail as a tactic and a strategy? And, what could what could others learn from your experience?
Yeah, so I know that as a marketer, when everything changed last year, we were all struggling to pivot and figure out how do we still stay top of mind in front of our target accounts? How do we break through the noise? And a lot of folks, a lot of colleagues that I spoke to, the first thing that they nixed in terms of their account, campaign plans, was direct mail. Like, people are not in the office anymore. There's no way for us to get packages to people if we know that they're going to get them or not. And I took that as a challenge. And we actually have a pretty unique offering for our clients, where brands can essentially opt in to buy a curated or branded box that they can send to a hyper targeted list of influencers to test out their products, leave ratings and reviews, generate visual and social content. And a lot of brands didn't really quite understand what that sampling campaign was all about. And so we wanted to put the product in front of them and allow them to really interact with it in real time. So have something tangible to open and experience what that sampling campaign would look like for them. So we put together a series of themed boxes that our sales team would then send out to clients and prospects after we identified who was going to be on that target account list, and gave them that kind of hands-on experience. So in terms of business outcomes, we, over the last year, we've run 2 campaigns at this point. We've generated over $3.5 million in pipe and $1.2 million in close one revenue. And why I feel like that's so significant is, as a marketer, especially when you're looking at ABM, it's sometimes very challenging to show marketing attribution from a reporting standpoint, because ABM follows accounts for the entire sales funnel, right? So you're not, everything that you do from a tactic or campaign level isn't always going to tie back to an MQA or an opportunity or the contact that's tied to the opportunity. I mean, we could go into marketing attribution issues all day long, right? But when we ran these direct mail campaigns, there was a way for me to tie back that ROI to those business outcomes. And so it allowed me to kind of show those results from a numerical standpoint and a business outcome standpoint, and also give the sales team another lever for them to pull to break outside of the noise of traditional calls and email and actually get, these box experiences in front of clients and prospects. And so it was huge for not only opening up doors for new conversations with prospects, but also deal acceleration with current open opportunities that we had, and also a way to build on the relationship with upcoming renewals as well. So for me, direct mail has been a huge driver, a huge impact for ABM. And we were able to do all of this without a direct mail software in place. We worked with local vendors. We used a lot of spreadsheets. So again, to earlier points that were talked about before, tech is nice to have, but tech is not the driver of your ABM campaigns. And you can make some pretty creative workarounds if you have the drive and the team to help support.
Yeah. That's really interesting, Jen. And it sounds like you guys did some upfront research and understanding of what these core themes are. And then the downstream localization was a rep choosing to send which one made the most sense for that account, which is great, because instead of it being this custom experience every single time that's hard to replicate, you can maybe do some of that up front, and then downstream it scales in a way that, maybe it wouldn't if it was sort of something that we're doing every single time. And it just takes a lot of time and energy and bandwidth just to build that out.
Exactly.
Okay, so I could keep on peppering you guys with questions, but I know we've got a lot of really good ones in the chat, so I want to make sure we get to those. So thank you all, first off, for all of that really great insight. I learned a ton just talking with you guys over the last few weeks. So let's just jump over to the Q&A, and I'm just going to go kind of down the list looking at those that have been upvoted the most. I was waiting for this one because I think, we've talked about it a little bit, but thinking about, there's a couple around ABM. We're not just talking to, I think it's from Libby. When you think of ABX or you're digging into key accounts to identify core individuals, it's easy for companies to fall into the trap of thinking of accounts as a singular entity. I know we talked about this a little bit, but just, I think we have also talked about contact build. Like, how do you guys think about the people? There's the account level, there's the vertical level, that all of that absolutely matters, but anything more that you guys could share at the person level that has gone into your ABM strategy and planning? And this is just open question for anybody.
I think it's very critical. You're exactly right. A singular entity is, again, road to disaster. Even persona is road to disaster, because not all procurement people think the same way. Not all IT people think the same way. So this is a part of your pre-work, doing the account research, to really, if you can, get to know the person that is making up the buyer's committee, and what is the agenda or the charter they've been tasked with. Sometimes it is not possible to get that level of detail, but that would be the ultimate goal, is to get to the point where who is the buying committee, what are their roles, and what is their personal charter that is driving their agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I also love to build out within your MQA trigger is like weighting your buyers. So adding more weight to the right kinds of titles to give you a clearer picture of how you're correctly or incorrectly engaging your accounts. So not just looking at the overall engagement score, because that gives you a picture of how the account is engaging, but who within the account is engaging, and utilizing a heat map. Are you actually getting the right people to pay attention?
Yeah. Amber, that was actually a really good segue to another question from Christina, which is talking about what needs to be true, or just from our experiences, like what needs to be true in terms of an account being a good fit. Is it intent score? Is it engagement? Is it their vertical? Is it something else? Open ACV. Just curious how you guys have thought about it, especially because the big thing that we struggle with a lot at Zuora is just how do we prioritize? We've got a huge universe of accounts at the one-to-many level. What qualifies as that one-to-few, and then even further, what qualifies as that one-to-one? And would love to know how you guys have thought about that before.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Amber. Go ahead.
I've always, worked with, the ICP, leveraging qualitative and quantitative data. Mm-hmm. And I think that Jen and I probably are about to say the same thing. But really, you have to build out a foundational kind of borders via your ICP, your MQA, kind of, these baseline rules that give you the picture. But then you have to partner with sales. They are your, source of truth when it comes to who the right person is at the right time, Jen?
Yeah, I would second all of that. We look at historical data, historical win rates to figure out, out of our total prospect list, if we're looking at it from an acquisition standpoint, who are the right accounts for us to go out to based on these lookalike audiences that we've been able to base off of our historical data. And then leaning on your account teams. They are the ones on the front lines. They know where we have the biggest opportunity for growth. They know where there's white space, and they know where there's gaps in terms of stakeholders that we need to engage with and enable to be a part of that decision-making process. So we're activating that wider buying committee. So leaning on those account teams is definitely pivotal when you're thinking about who to go after and how you want to prioritize those accounts.
And I think I could answer a little bit of this myself. For Zuora, we think about this at the fit grade level, kind of like ICP, everything you guys just talked about. What also plus one on kind of the layer of the sales insight that also, like, these folks are the closest to these accounts. They've worked them for years. They definitely have, a level of context that we don't have in the data that we want to make sure we're thinking about. We also think about intent at Zuora. So thinking about where we're seeing kind of signals in the market through, like 6 Sense or other tools that is telling us not only do we have an account that's a good fit, but they're showing some level of intent, from a decision or purchase perspective. So we may want to prioritize them more. And then also where someone's showing engagement with us within, our own properties. So on our website, signing up for events, webinars, other things. And it's kind of the sweet spot if you have like fit and intent and like engagement already with your accounts or with your own marketing programs. Not to say those 3 things have to be true every single time, but that really is a good sweet spot that we found that we focus on. So last question, I know we are running out of time. And this is from Jacqueline. In everybody's experience, how do you communicate with sales? We've talked a lot about sales being so important. They're a key stakeholder. How do you stay aligned with them in this process? How do you become and stay that trusted advisor? How do you continue to share updates as this, it's a marathon as we talked about, so it's not kind of a one and done motion, but what are some of your tips and tricks?
For me, I feel like it's transparency and just being, again, upfront on those early wins and KPIs that you're tracking, and use that single source of truth that sales lives and breathes in every single day, which is Salesforce. So the more that you can have feed into where they are interacting every day, I think that's where you're going to get the most engagement and the most adoption and have that open feedback loop. And then for our one-to-one campaigns, we have regular scheduled meetings with those account teams to make sure that we're looking at the strategy, we're looking at the results, finding new ways to optimize, making sure that we have all of the correct stakeholders mapped out, and continue to test, rinse, and repeat, especially for those strategic one-to-one programs.
Awesome. All right. I think we're done, right? Are you here to tell us wrap it up?
Yeah.
We're fast.
We're a few minutes over, but it's all right. Honestly, we could keep talking about this for hours. Personally, I loved it. I want to thank everyone for joining. We have a couple of minutes till the Jay Bear session as well, but thank you to this incredible panel. Thank you, Becky, for moderating everything. I learned a ton. Hope you all learned a ton, and we'll see you guys soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Enjoy the
Thank
show.
you.